I'm Amanda Miller. I'm the executive director of the South King Tool Libraries in Federal Way in Auburn. Operational budgeting, seed to sustaining. I by no means expect to go entirely into everything I have here. I wanted to put all the thoughts into the slides so you guys could go back and look at these again later. You could get an idea. Style of teaching is like, you have to figure it out anyway. So I'm going to tell you as much information and give you the good grounds to stand on. First and foremost, just like you guys have heard probably multiple times, centering and setting your priorities, even for a budget. I know it's silly, budgets are tedious. What is a budget? There's so many different kinds. We're going to go with the operational pieces. So Leanna had some great examples for fundraising. That plays into this as well, but making sure at all times centering, what your mission vision, breaking it apart into what I've called buckets, and then a timeline to really hold yourself accountable and the realities of the limitations that come with those as well. So maybe here, sources for startups. There are a lot of them. They are sexy. It's exciting. People want to do things that are new and fresh and on the ground. So look to grants, especially grants, because a lot of grants are project-based. So if you're starting out from the ground up, then you might want to consider segmenting what you want to do into projects and then pursue grants to do those things that line up with them. Also pre-sale, I've seen some really adaptive models about adoption of tools. I don't think we ever really want to see a Coca-Cola tool library, but naming rights have been tossed around as ideas. And then, maybe there is a fairy godmother father sort of situation. Find a venture capitalist, sponsorship, donations. Those are individuals and folks that really want to see this, your mission and vision take off. Buckets, very not exciting again, but I think it kind of is, because my brain, I need to sort things. So to help you start formulating this budget, even at the seed level, even at the beginning, even before you have any tools in hand or any things in hand, consider, these kind of categories, these higher level pieces. That's the space, operations, and people. I put the secret fourth bucket down there of things, because that is not something that is, it's a process. So we'll come back to that in a minute, but had to add my little bucket guy in there to make it more exciting. The space. Also wanted to point out, I added a lot of little things here, kind of went crazy, but bear with me. Come back to this later if you want to. Capacity and insurance, because insurance is something that we talk about all the time as tool libraries and as libraries of things, because it's a big question, it's a big unknown, it's a big thing that sits over our shoulders sometimes. So just understand it can be incremental, it can be in parts, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So high level space, storage rentals, signage doesn't seem like it's as important, but actually really is. If you're central on a bus line, or if you're hidden in the middle of private property, you might need to have some directional things. So making that hierarchy for yourselves, and then making sure that you're doing due diligence to hammer out all of the pieces that are going to go into your budget. So like I said, considering these things when you're going into a budget, you're going to have to look at the lofty goals, expectations, and then the reality of all of them. And of course, centering your alignment. So the little gray section there is specialization, because things like, I don't know, building a shipping container building or being in a mall come with their own problems. Like, you can't just put a shelf up on the side of a shipping container, and you can't just be noisy when the mall is open. Apparently people don't like that, but so, that will come as things move along. The next sort of bucket is people. And if you don't have staff, you are people, we are people. And so you will expend capacity, you will spend time recruiting more people like you, smart people, smarter than you people, volunteers, and coordination of those things is pretty indispensable in a lot of the operations of nonprofits, of course, but especially when you're trying to lead the community. As you're going and breaking down what kind of people funds you want to drive towards your projects, consider what it would take. How many people do you have working at this goal already? And is it something that you can keep your hands around as you grow, as you get more capacity? And then those sort of eventualities down there in gray where you have, software management coordination for volunteers, you might want to invest in something that's transactional and reminds your volunteers to show up for their shifts and keeps their contact information secure. Insurance, just an inevitability because it comes up as questions too. Let's see, operations. So this is the exciting part, right? Operationally, you can let someone borrow something without having any sort of institution behind you. But as you grow and develop and establish yourself as this entity, you are going to have operational costs that go along with things. Of course, the more you open to the public, the more different programs you have. And each of those should have kind of separate buckets, but falling under your operations, you can list out all your dreams and goals and ideas. And what you want to do is put a for now and a for later kind of priority to it. Another, capacity and insurance element to all of these things, because it's going to take time to manage every piece of it, including if you're making your own or, organizational development of bylaws and articles of incorporation or marketing, that's still your time. And we were talking a little bit about tracking and even tracking that, because your time is important and your volunteers' time is important. So making sure that that is something that is on the radar as well. The fees, again, unseen. We were talking a little bit about the sales and about fundraising and fees that come along with that. So sales tax is a tricky one to consider. Fiscal sponsorship fees also, fiscal sponsorships are great. We started out also as a fiscal sponsored program, and the problems that can arise, you can mitigate those by, again, due diligence with your agreements and taking the time to maybe, dream board goals. You have an accountant, you got a lawyer on there, you got like a web dev guy, you got tool library folks that are real tool heavy. So when you're building out all of these pieces, it really plays into what you have at hand. If you have great volunteers at hand that are able to jump in and work through some of these, it might save you money in the long run. And then TechSoup, we already kind of talked about that a little too. So, all right, so much to cover here. All the things, because inevitably we want to talk about, my world is tools. I use tools very broadly. Libraries of things are things, but this is the best infographic I could really find. It's more of a spirally circle that kind of eats on itself over and over again, because the stuff is going to come to you and you're going to figure out and have to figure out what to do with it. And that's the, terminality is inevitable, recycling parts. But if you don't sort of have a plan, have a policy in place as far as what that will be, it can cost you money in the long. If you are maybe recycling metal instead of doing a tool sale, are you losing out on opportunities because you could be generating more income? So I wanted you to keep that as sort of a secondary element when you're considering what the budget in whole would look like. So allocating time for all of these elements and talent, of course, as well. So buckets. If you don't get anything else from this whole spiel, take a picture of this one. This is like the thing. This is when you're starting to getting operative and further and beyond. But this is really bare bones. I have some examples coming up to go with you guys too. But you can see people costs, asset costs, outreach, business, and then revenues. And being specific helps, again, to track and analyze what is working and what's not. If a credit card processor charges a higher fee than a different one, you can make a change and maybe make a little more on the back end. So revenue, I just wanted to touch on this before we go to some other examples. Yes, more money, more problems can be a thing, because that is not always what is going to serve your organization the best. So let's get into a little bit more about the negatives, the deltas, if you want to be technical about it here. Fundraisers, you can burn out your base. Leanna shared some really great insights into how to keep that fresh and going. Grants are slippery slope. You can miss deadlines, break rules, miss judgments on budget allocations. A lot of them are reimbursement based. A lot of them are not renewable. So there's some short-term viability to those. Pre-sale, if you miscommunicate or don't have the same alignments down the line. And again, trying to continue brand alignments can change over time as well. So sustaining your funding, so continuing after you've opened and you've getting things moving, is relationships, right? The basis of everything we're doing. So, the effort that you have to take and time to pursue those things, maybe you're joining business groups or maybe you're joining other community networking opportunities. You want to make sure you're doing that diligently, but also not in the same sort of circles. You have to understand the markets are going to vary. And then looking again reflectively at who is benefiting from the work, what new projects and funding is coming out, and then diversification, of course, that's a given for a lot of businesses and even nonprofits. So ongoing budget, budgets are living, breathing things. They are helping and tools as well, but you want to definitely consider what the ongoing budgets are. You don't want to wait to the last minute to have a budget for something. All of those funding sources are usually going to require budgets and tracking. So it seems like there's a lot of numbers involved and a lot of redundancy, but it helps to make sure that you're telling the story. And it's important to make sure that you are not misrepresenting yourself. And then I threw up here just as hot takes for you guys to see. This is on the left, our 2019 budget. You can see we have two high level buckets, expenses and revenues, and then the breakdown there. And then on the right hand side is wild because we had 5 grants under every level of government, as well as contracts and many other things. So just want to show you the difference that a few years can make in an organization and how you divvy up the budgets for those entities. And I can definitely share those with you guys. We're pretty transparent. There's also living documents. So as you go along, you have analysis that goes back and does year to dates and actualizes, answers those questions too. So you can see on the left-hand side, we have the budget and the actual, and oh, we're negative. That's crazy. I'll explain why in a minute. Eventually, you're going to add more budgets. You're going to add more buckets. You're going to add more different types of budgets to things. So your initial revenues and expenses will keep sort of breaking down as you get more expansive and more obligations as well. You might also consider the leadership management of these things. Who's going to own it? Who's going to verify it? You have treasurer, most likely on a board of directors or your organization as you're developing. You might also eventually want to bring on a paid position that's managing some of the elements. So have that clear line of checks and balances in line. I threw in some big words over on the other side as far as policies. And so as you negotiate different contracts and agreements, there are things that you'll come across you do have to have for handling things like government contracts, whistleblower grievance, conflict of interests, and even that 2 CFR 200, which is, I don't really know. I put a link to it in the end here. It's a wordy thing from the IRS. So but always anticipating the unexpected too. There are countless tool librarians that I have talked to that had to relocate. There's always problems happening, break-ins. So accounting for how that can affect you and what that is going to mean can be the difference between your, longevity or having to really pivot or completely dissolve your organization. So accrual versus cash. So that negative number, there are different types of accounting processes. You have accrual. And like I mentioned, some of those grants are reimbursement based. So you can be spending money and not bringing in the money in the same time period. Sometimes not in the same quarter, sometimes not even in the same year. But that's why having that policy in place can help you make sure that you understand what your money is doing, how it's working for you, and then creating things like quantifying your programs and tracking and reporting only do things like benefit your outcomes. I do like giving people numbers when I'm talking to like service groups, because I think it does play well to folks that are looking at investing or donating a little bit. But something like a 3-to-1 return on investment for our outcomes. So we've calculated something like $1.2 million has been saved by the community in our 4 years of operation. And we take that number and just compare it to how much we have actually spent in every category. So you can plug in what works for now and then make it better as you keep going. Cash flow is another one that helps to balance those accruals and cash as well. And there's a cat because those words are boring mostly. So that's exciting. But there, I finished, yay. And I just wanted to throw in some links that I thought might be helpful, some of those big words. I'm trying to find if there is like a succinct summary for insurance providers, because you generally do have to add like your depreciation versus donated values. And we weigh everything as well. So I think that's something that comes into other conversations about reporting and metrics, but I think that helps us make sure that we're not missing out on a lot when it comes to tracking. And yeah, there's some government links and lots of other things I could probably keep talking about, but I will stop